She never imagined that ordering a cup of coffee would change her life forever. Chen thought she was just another face in the crowd until the moment she was humiliated in front of everyone. What happened next left the entire restaurant speechless. Maya had always been invisible. At 26, she worked double shifts at Henderson Community Library, earning barely enough to cover rent on her studio apartment above Mrs. Patterson's bakery. Her wardrobe consisted of 3 pairs of jeans, 5 thrift store sweaters, and 1 decent dress she saved for job interviews that never seemed to lead anywhere promising. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Riverside was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, except somehow nobody really knew Maya. She'd been shuffled through foster homes since age 7, never staying anywhere long enough to plant roots. The only constant in her life had been books, and the quiet sanctuary of the library where dust motes danced in afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. Her morning routine never varied. Wake at 5:30, shower quickly to avoid using too much hot water, grab yesterday's leftover muffin from Mrs. Patterson, who always claimed they were about to go stale anyway, then walk the 8 blocks to work. Maya preferred walking. Bus fare added up, and she needed every dollar for her evening classes at the community college, where she studied business administration with dreams of someday managing something more significant than overdue book returns. The library felt like home in ways no foster placement ever had. Between the biography section and local history archives, Maya had carved out her own small kingdom. She knew every regular patron by name, remembered their reading preferences, and somehow always managed to set aside the books she suspected they'd enjoy before they even knew such books existed. Margaret Holloway, the head librarian, often said Maya had an intuitive understanding of what people needed before they asked. This talent extended beyond book recommendations. Maya could sense when elderly Mr. Rodriguez needed someone to listen to stories about his late wife, when teenage Samantha required gentle guidance toward college prep materials, or when young mothers appreciated quiet corners where their toddlers could explore picture books without judgment. Despite her gift for understanding others, Maya remained remarkably disconnected from her own desires. She lived carefully, spending minimally, saving whatever possible, while maintaining the kind of invisible existence that never drew attention or criticism. Her apartment contained necessities: a twin bed with mismatched sheets, a small table that served as both desk and dining area, and shelves constructed from boards and concrete blocks, overflowing with library discards and used paperbacks. Maya's only indulgence was Tuesday evenings at Riverside Community College, where Professor Williams taught Introduction to Business Management. She sat in the back row, took meticulous notes, and dreamed of possibilities beyond her current circumstances. Her classmates were mostly young professionals seeking advancement or career changes, people with networks and references and families who believed in their potential. She envied their casual confidence, the way they spoke about future plans as certainties rather than distant fantasies. When group projects required sharing personal business ideas, Maya contributed practical suggestions while keeping her own dreams private. She wanted to open a small bookstore cafe, somewhere people could discover stories while enjoying homemade pastries and genuine conversation. It seemed impossibly ambitious for someone with her background and resources. The closest Maya had ever come to her dream was visiting Meridian Heights, the affluent district 30 minutes by bus from Riverside. She'd discovered it accidentally during a job interview at their upscale branch library, arriving 2 hours early due to misreading the appointment time. Rather than wait awkwardly, she'd wandered the pristine streets lined with boutiques, galleries, and restaurants that seemed to exist in an alternate universe. One establishment had particularly captured her imagination: Bellacourt, an elegant Italian restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing glimpses of white tablecloths, crystal stemware, and servers moving with practiced grace. Maya had pressed her face against the glass like a child at a candy store, imagining the conversations happening inside, the stories being shared over carefully prepared meals. The job interview hadn't gone well. Maya's references were adequate but not impressive, her experience limited to one library in one small town. The hiring manager, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, had asked about leadership experience, professional development goals, and networking capabilities with the kind of expectation that assumed everyone possessed such things naturally. Maya had answered honestly about her dedication to patron service and her evening business classes, But honesty felt inadequate against other candidates who likely had college degrees, professional mentors, and families capable of providing career guidance. She'd returned home that evening feeling foolish for imagining she could compete in such a sophisticated environment. Yet something about Meridian Heights had lingered in her thoughts. Perhaps it represented possibility, proof that elegant spaces and meaningful work existed even if they seemed beyond her reach. Sometimes during particularly difficult days at the library when budget cuts threatened hours or equipment failures disrupted services, Maya would close her eyes and remember the warm glow emanating from Bellecourt's windows. 3 months after the failed job interview, Maya received unexpected news that would inadvertently lead her back to Meridian Heights. Mrs. Patterson announced she was selling the bakery and retiring to Florida to live near her daughter. Maya had 2 weeks to find new housing, a challenge in Riverside where affordable options were scarce and waiting lists lengthy. Desperate circumstances led to desperate measures. Maya contacted every rental listing within bus range of her job, including several in Meridian Heights that were probably beyond her budget but worth investigating. Most landlords never returned her calls once they learned about her income level, but one small efficiency apartment seemed possible if she took on additional weekend work. The apartment viewing was scheduled for Saturday morning, which gave Maya her first opportunity to revisit Meridian Heights since the job interview. She arrived early again, this time intentionally, wanting to walk familiar streets and remind herself why she'd been drawn to this area, despite its obvious incompatibility with her financial reality. Bellecourt looked exactly as she remembered, perhaps even more inviting in morning sunlight that highlighted the restaurant's architectural details and illuminated fresh flowers arranged in window boxes. Maya paused on the sidewalk, watching through the windows as staff prepared for the day ahead. Servers polished stemware and arranged table settings with methodical precision, while someone who appeared to be the manager reviewed paperwork at a corner table. The scene looked peaceful, purposeful, like a carefully choreographed performance preparing for an important show. Maya imagined herself as part of such an operation, contributing to creating memorable experiences for people celebrating special occasions or conducting important business over thoughtfully prepared meals. Her apartment viewing went better than expected. The efficiency was tiny but clean, with one large window overlooking a small courtyard and just enough space for her essential belongings. The rent stretched her budget uncomfortably, but weekend shifts at the library, plus occasional freelance bookkeeping for local businesses, might make it manageable. Maya signed the lease that afternoon, surprising herself with this uncharacteristic leap towards something uncertain but potentially transformative. Moving to Meridian Heights wouldn't change her fundamental circumstances, but it would place her in proximity to opportunities that simply didn't exist in Riverside. The transition proved more challenging than anticipated. Maya's commute to the library now required 2 buses and careful timing to avoid being late. Her new neighbors were polite but distant, clearly puzzled by her presence in their upscale building. Grocery shopping required strategic planning since local markets catered to customers with significantly higher budgets than hers. Yet something about the environment energized Maya in unexpected ways. Walking to bus stops took her past interesting businesses and cultural venues. She discovered a small public garden where she could eat lunch on pleasant days, and a bookstore that stayed open late, where she could browse after classes without feeling pressure to purchase. Most significantly, she began noticing help-wanted signs in restaurant windows. Maya had never considered food service, assuming her lack of experience would be prohibitive, but proximity created possibility. Several establishments seemed to be seeking entry-level staff, and Maya's customer service skills from the library might translate to restaurant work. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day dealing with library computer system failures and budget meeting discussions about further staff reductions, Maya walked past Bellecourt and noticed a small sign in the window. "Seeking dedicated team members. Inquire within." She stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, gathering courage while imagining herself as part of the graceful choreography she'd observed through those windows. Finally, she pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into an environment that felt like entering another world entirely. The interior exceeded her expectations. Warm lighting cast everything in golden tones, while classical music played softly beneath the gentle murmur of dinner conversation. Fresh flowers adorned every table, and the aroma of garlic, herbs, and something deliciously complex filled the air. Maya felt immediately underdressed in her library work clothes, but a hostess approached with genuine warmth. "Good evening. Are you here for dinner? Actually, I noticed your hiring sign. I was wondering about possible positions. The hostess, whose name tag read Sophie, smiled encouragingly. Wonderful. Let me get our manager, Mr. Rossetti. He's been hoping to meet potential candidates. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya waited near the entrance, trying not to stare too obviously at the elegant diners and efficient staff. Everything seemed to flow seamlessly, from servers who anticipated needs before being asked to the careful timing of food delivery that ensured hot plates arrived simultaneously at tables of varying sizes. Mr. Rossetti appeared within minutes, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes and an accent that suggested Italian heritage. He looked Maya up and down, appraising Ly but not unkindly, taking in her modest appearance and nervous posture. "You're interested in joining our team?" "Yes, sir. I don't have restaurant experience, but I work in customer service at Henderson Library. I'm reliable, quick to learn, and very dedicated to providing excellent service." Mr. Rossetti nodded thoughtfully. "Experience can be taught. Attitude cannot. When could you start?" Maya blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a position?" "Hostess training, initially. 3 evenings per week, weekends as needed. We'll see how you adapt before discussing additional responsibilities." The pay was better than Maya had expected, and the schedule would allow her to maintain her library job while gaining restaurant experience. She accepted immediately, perhaps too eagerly, but Mr. Rossetti seemed pleased by her enthusiasm. "One thing," he added as Maya prepared to leave. "Bellecourt maintains certain standards. Professional appearance, composed demeanor, ability to interact comfortably with our clientele. Can you manage that?" Maya assured him she could, though privately she worried about her limited wardrobe and whether she possessed the sophistication expected in such an upscale environment. That night she inventoried her closet and calculated how much she could afford to spend on appropriate work clothes without compromising her ability to pay rent. Her first shift at Bellecourt was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Sophie trained her on reservation systems, seating protocols, and the subtle art of managing wait times while maintaining positive customer relationships. Maya discovered she had natural instincts for reading people and situations, skills that transferred surprisingly well from library work. The restaurant's clientele was unlike anyone Maya had encountered regularly. Business executives discussing million-dollar deals over wine pairings, socialites planning charity galas between courses, young professionals celebrating promotions with elaborate desserts. She learned to navigate conversations about topics completely outside her experience, while maintaining the kind of gracious professionalism that made guests feel welcomed and valued. Within 2 weeks, Maya had earned praise from both Mr. Rossetti and the senior staff. Her genuine warmth and attention to detail impressed guests who were accustomed to more practiced but less authentic service. She remembered names, preferences, and personal details that returning customers appreciated, creating the kind of personalized experience that distinguished Bellecourt from other upscale establishments. The work was demanding but fulfilling in ways Maya hadn't anticipated. She felt useful, valued, and surprisingly competent in an environment that had initially seemed impossibly sophisticated. Her confidence grew with each successful shift, and she began to imagine possibilities for advancement within the restaurant industry. Then came the evening that would change everything. Maya was seating a party of 6 business associates when she noticed a commotion near the entrance. A woman in an expensive coat was speaking loudly to Sophie, gesturing dismissively while other guests turned to stare. "I specifically requested the corner table by the window. This is completely unacceptable." Maya recognized the woman immediately. Victoria Sterling, a prominent local socialite whose photograph appeared regularly in the society pages of Meridian Heights magazine. She was known for her charitable work, her extensive art collection, and according to restaurant industry gossip, her demanding expectations and limited patience with staff who failed to meet them. Sophie was handling the situation professionally, explaining that the requested table was occupied by guests with a standing reservation, but offering several excellent alternatives. Victoria was having none of it, her voice rising as she declared this treatment absolutely outrageous and threatened to take her business elsewhere. Mr. Rossetti appeared quickly, as he always did when situations required management intervention. Maya watched from across the room as he spoke quietly with Victoria, eventually convincing her to accept a beautifully appointed table near the fireplace. The crisis seemed resolved until Victoria noticed Maya observing the interaction. "And who is that girl staring at us?" Victoria demanded, pointing directly at Maya. "Is she even supposed to be working here?" Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks as every head in the restaurant turned toward her. She was wearing her best professional outfit, a black dress she'd found at a consignment shop, and paired with her only pair of dress shoes, but under Victoria's scrutiny, she felt exposed and inadequate. Mr. Rossetti glanced toward Maya with an expression of concern. "That's Maya, one of our hostesses. She's been doing excellent work." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she studied Maya more closely. "She looks like she belongs behind a gas station counter, not in an establishment like this. Honestly, the standards here have clearly declined." The words hit Maya like physical blows. Around them, other diners pretended not to listen while obviously hanging on every word of the increasingly public confrontation. Maya wanted to disappear, to somehow become invisible as she'd been for most of her life, but all eyes remained fixed on her. "Perhaps," Victoria continued, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent restaurant, "she would be more comfortable somewhere more suited to her." Background: Maya felt tears threatening and knew she needed to escape before the situation became even more humiliating. She began moving toward the staff area, hoping to reach privacy before completely breaking down, when the restaurant's front door opened and everything changed. The man who entered Bellecourt commanded attention without effort. Tall and distinguished, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. His silver hair was impeccably styled, and his dark eyes swept the restaurant with calculated assessment before settling on the scene unfolding near the fireplace table. Maya recognized him instantly, though she'd never seen him in person. David Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Industries, one of the largest technology conglomerates on the West Coast. His face graced business magazines and financial news programs with the same frequency that Victoria Sterling appeared in society pages. Forbes had recently ranked him among the wealthiest individuals in the country, a self-made billionaire who'd built his empire from a single software patent developed in his garage 30 years ago. What Maya couldn't understand was why seeing him made her heart race with something beyond starstruck recognition. Something deeper, more primal, stirred in her chest as his gaze found hers across the crowded restaurant. Victoria Sterling had fallen silent mid-sentence, her attention diverted by the arrival of someone whose social standing far exceeded her own. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath as David Chen walked purposefully toward their corner, his expression growing darker with each step. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority that made Victoria straighten involuntarily. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." Victoria's demeanor shifted instantly, replacing her earlier aggression with the practiced charm she reserved for individuals who mattered in her social ecosystem. "Mr. Chen, what a delightful surprise. I was just addressing a small service issue with the management." David's eyes never left Maya's face, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed yet strangely protected. "And what exactly was the nature of this service issue?" "Nothing significant," Victoria backtracked, suddenly aware that her public tantrum might not reflect well on her reputation. "Simply a matter of ensuring appropriate standards." "Appropriate standards," David repeated slowly, his tone suggesting he found the phrase distasteful. "Could you elaborate on what you consider appropriate?" Mr. Rossetti stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation developing in his restaurant. "Mr. Chen, perhaps we could discuss this privately. I assure you, we maintain the highest standards of service and professionalism." David held up a hand without breaking eye contact with Maya. "I'd like to hear from the young lady herself. What's your name?" Maya's voice caught in her throat. Speaking to David Chen felt surreal, like being addressed by a character from a movie who'd suddenly stepped into real life. "Maya," she managed. "Maya Chen." The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the restaurant froze, waiting for David's reaction to what seemed like an impossible coincidence. Two people sharing the same uncommon surname, one a billionaire tech mogul and the other a struggling hostess in a restaurant where their paths should never have crossed. David's expression transformed completely. The calculated businessman disappeared, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. His hand moved toward Maya as if drawn by magnetic force, then stopped inches from her face, trembling slightly. "Maya," he whispered, and the way he said her name carried 26 years of longing. "My God, Maya." "I don't understand," Maya said, though somewhere deep inside, she was beginning to. David's eyes filled with tears he didn't attempt to hide. "You have your mother's eyes. Sarah's eyes. I've been looking for you for 26 years. The restaurant erupted in whispers as guests processed this impossible revelation. Victoria Sterling stood frozen, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. Mr. Rossetti stepped closer, his own expression reflecting the surreal nature of the situation. "Mr. Chen, are you saying that Maya is—" "My daughter," David confirmed, his voice breaking slightly. "My daughter, who was taken from me when she was 7 years old." Maya felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The foster homes, the constant relocations, the complete absence of information about her biological family suddenly took on new meaning. "That's impossible," she said weakly. "My father was. I was told he was." "Dead?" David's laugh was bitter. "That's what they told you, wasn't it? That I was dead, or that I'd abandoned you, or that I wasn't fit to care for you." The memories Maya had suppressed for years began surfacing. Vague recollections of a man who read her bedtime stories, who taught her to plant seeds in small pots on a sunny windowsill, who called her his little flower and promised she would always be safe. A man who had disappeared from her life so completely that she'd convinced herself he'd been a dream. "You used to sing to me," Maya said, the words emerging without conscious thought. Off-key lullabies that made me laugh. David's composure cracked entirely. "You remember. I thought I'd imagined you." After so many foster homes, so many different stories about why I was alone, I decided you must have been something I'd created to feel less abandoned. Victoria Sterling chose this moment to attempt an exit, clearly recognizing that her presence had become not just unwelcome, but potentially damaging to her reputation. She gathered her coat and purse, moving toward the door with as much dignity as someone could muster after publicly humiliating a billionaire's daughter. "Ms. Sterling," David's voice stopped her mid-escape. "Before you leave, I believe you owe Maya an apology." Victoria turned, her face pale but defiant. "I had no way of knowing about your relationship. The situation was simply a misunderstanding." "The situation," David said, stepping closer to Maya in a gesture that was unmistakably protective, "was you publicly demeaning a young woman based on your assumptions about her background and worth. Your ignorance of her identity doesn't excuse your behavior." The entire restaurant watched as Victoria Sterling, accustomed to being treated with deference due to her social position, was forced to confront someone whose power far exceeded her own. She looked between David and Maya, calculating the social and professional costs of continued defiance. "I apologize," she said finally, the words clearly painful. "My comments were inappropriate." David's expression remained cold. "I think you'll find that treating people with basic human dignity serves you better than making assumptions about their value based on their appearance or perceived social status." Victoria nodded quickly and fled, leaving behind an atmosphere charged with tension and astonishment. Mr. Rossetti approached cautiously. "Mr. Chen, Maya, perhaps you'd prefer privacy for your reunion. I can arrange a private dining room." David looked to Maya for her preference. She felt overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her reality, struggling to process that the father she'd mourned was standing beside her, that her entire understanding of her past had been built on lies. "I need to understand," Maya said. "What happened? Why was I taken from you? Why did they tell me you were dead?" David's jaw tightened with old anger. "Your mother's family never approved of our marriage. When Sarah died in that car accident, They used their connections and considerable resources to have you removed from my custody. They claimed I was an unfit father, that my work schedule and travel requirements made me incapable of providing proper care. But you're successful, established. How could they possibly? I wasn't then, David said quietly. I was a struggling entrepreneur working 18-hour days, trying to build something from nothing. To them, I was an unsuitable nobody who'd somehow convinced their daughter to marry beneath her station. When Sarah died, they saw an opportunity to correct what they viewed as her mistake. Maya felt anger building, not at David, but at the people who'd stolen her childhood and fabricated her history. They told me I had no family, that there was no one. I fought them, David continued, his voice heavy with old pain. Spent everything I had on lawyers, private investigators, court battles. But they had influence, connections, the kind of social power that can make evidence disappear and witnesses reconsider their testimony. By the time I'd built enough success to challenge them effectively, you'd been moved so many times that the trail had gone completely cold. The injustice of it overwhelmed Maya. Years of loneliness, of believing herself unwanted and unworthy, all based on the manipulations of people who'd valued their prejudices more than her well-being. I never stopped looking, David said, reaching for her hand with careful tenderness. Every private investigator in the country has had your case at some point. I've funded organizations that help connect families separated by the system. I've donated millions to foster care reform initiatives, hoping that somehow improving the system might lead me back to you. Maya understood now why his name appeared so frequently in connection with charitable causes. His philanthropy hadn't been about tax benefits or social recognition, but about a father's desperate hope of finding his lost daughter. The name, Maya said suddenly. If you were looking for me, wouldn't you have found me through the name? David's expression darkened further. They changed it. Your legal documents listed you as Maya Thompson, your mother's maiden name. It took me years to even discover that detail, and by then you'd aged out of the system and disappeared into the general population. Mr. Rossetti had been listening with growing amazement. Maya, you never mentioned your background. We had no idea. I didn't know, Maya said simply. I thought I was alone in the world. David studied his daughter's face, taking in the woman she'd become despite the circumstances that had shaped her life. You're not alone, he said firmly. You haven't been alone for a single day, even when I couldn't find you. I've been here, building something I hoped we could share someday. The conversation was interrupted by Sophie approaching with obvious nervousness. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have other guests waiting to be seated, and the situation is becoming rather disruptive. David looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware of the dozens of diners who were openly staring at their reunion. Camera phones had appeared at several tables, and he recognized the potential for their private moment to become public spectacle. Maya, he said, would you come with me? We have 26 years to catch up on, and this isn't the place for that conversation. Maya glanced at Mr. Rossetti, suddenly concerned about abandoning her shift without notice. Despite everything that had just transpired, her work ethic remained intact. Go, Mr. Rossetti said kindly. Take all the time you need. Your position here will be waiting whenever you're ready to return. David looked surprised. You don't need to worry about employment, Maya. I can provide for you, help you pursue whatever dreams or goals you've had to put aside due to financial constraints. I appreciate that, Maya said carefully. But I've built my own life. I have work I care about, responsibilities I can't just abandon. Whatever relationship we rebuild, it needs to respect who I've become, not just who I was when I was 7. David's smile was the first genuinely joyful expression Maya had seen from him. Your mother used to say the same thing about maintaining her independence. She insisted on keeping her job even after we married, said she needed to contribute something that was entirely her own. Maya felt a connection to the mother she barely remembered, understanding now where her own fierce independence had originated. Tell me about her, she said, as they moved toward the restaurant's exit. Tell me everything. Outside Bellecourt, David's driver waited beside a sleek black sedan. Maya hesitated, struck by the surreal nature of her circumstances. This morning, she'd been a struggling library worker, taking evening classes and working part-time as a hostess. Now she was the daughter of one of the country's wealthiest men. being invited into a world she'd never imagined accessing. "This is overwhelming," she admitted. "We'll take it slowly," David assured her, "at whatever pace feels comfortable for you. I've waited 26 years to find you, Maya. I can wait as long as you need to adjust to having a father again." As they drove through Meridian Heights toward David's estate, Maya watched familiar streets transform into something entirely different now that she belonged here not as an interloper, but by birthright. The revelation didn't solve her immediate concerns about rent or student loans or her uncertain future, but it opened possibilities she'd never dared consider. More importantly, it filled the empty space in her heart where family should have been. For the first time in her adult life, Maya Chen wasn't alone in the world. She had a father who'd never stopped loving her, never stopped searching, never given up hope that someday they'd find each other again. The simple woman who'd been told she didn't belong had discovered she belonged somewhere more significant than she'd ever dreamed possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.